Hi, my name is Randi Robertson, and this is for my Linguistics 3200 class. I observed for the last 5.5 hours for East High School's Mr. Hare and Mrs. Richardson's ELL classes. Mr. Hare teaches ELL math for the beginner level at East High, and he is very clear in what he expects of the students, but does not translate in any other language but in English what he wants of them. He starts each day with telling about 20 students that instructing them on that day's lesson. The lessons in particular that I've observed are about subtracting and adding negative numbers, positive numbers, and with absolute value and what that means, and using khanacademy.org. About half the students are Spanish speaking, and one student is a refugee student from Somalia. Her name is Nemo, and there's a Vietnamese student from Vietnam, obviously, and his name is Dot. The other students speak Spanish or, basic American English, but some of the things that they say and do are still under where they should be based on how long they've been here. Most of these students in this math class, as well as the beginner language arts class that Mrs. Richardson teaches, that I observed, they're all been here for 6 months or less, Nemo being here the least for only 2 months, and some of the students up to almost a year now, and are either 10th, 11th, or even 12th grade, and probably won't graduate yet. They probably will have to go through at least another year in the ELL program before they can graduate and have the skills needed to graduate. I noticed that after being handed out worksheets or packets, depending on the time in each math class, it's about an hour and 20 minutes, but on different bell schedules, it's 40 minutes to an hour, and so they get less work to do on those days. The average student gets through about half of a packet in the class period, Dot going way faster and finishing 1 or 2 or even 3 packets sometimes, and Nemo barely finishing a page or so a day. Then some errors in that class that I've noticed are as I look at my paper, are in phonology. Now, Mr. Hare does not teach phonology in his class, and it's math, so it's not really expected of him, but he probably should to help them out. One of the Spanish-speaking male students said absolute value instead of absolute value, and as you can see in my notebook, I wrote down the IPA for that, as well as just my notes in looking for this video. He should have said absolute instead of absolute, and he just changed vowels around and did that incorrectly. And the teacher, Mr. Hare, did not correct him or how to say it. A classmate did. And then he asked me if that's how you say it, and I helped him say it properly in American English. I would probably have said it the same way he did, or instead of absolute, I would have said absolute and forgot the B or something, but I'm not really sure because I am a native American English speaker. A semantics issue is when Nemo thought she heard the word lessening instead of listening. Mr. Hare said, "Are you listening to what Mr. Khan is saying on Khan Academy about the answers and the way you solve the problem?" She kept subtracting and lessening each answer instead of responding, "Yes, we are listening," like the other students did, or "Sí" in Spanish that the Spanish speakers responded with. Mr. Hare does not teach vocabulary at all. Mrs. Richardson does extensively, and when I get there, I'll explain that. Mr. Hare just teaches one ELL class, and it's only for about an hour and 20 minutes, and he doesn't seem to mind that they have no idea what he's talking about, and he just continues and drags on and has me and the helper help them versus him assisting as well. Anyway, on to Mrs. Richardson's class. She has a little more amount of students per class in language arts. For ELL students, she has about 25 in the beginner class and 22 in the upper advanced class. And both classes have more than just Nemo as being a refugee student from Somalia and several other places. There are more Spanish-speaking students as well. And in the upper division class, there are two African-American boys that are from South Africa, and there's a couple from Africa that isn't South Africa. He wouldn't tell me, he just said not South Africa. They, in the upper division class, read a book and call about a refugee student that is taken away from her home, kidnapped, and sold into prostitution. And when they were talking about human rights, one of the boys made an error and said men's and women's should all have equal rights instead of men and women. And so he just added the plural and did that error. Dot also made another error and said not stood on his poster of the important quote from the book. Instead of saying understood, he said not stood. And I would have understood if he would have used not stood for misunderstood, but the word in the book was understood. So he just translated it incorrectly or wrote it down wrong, and then nobody corrected him. They just left it on the poster. And they didn't even get marked down points for it the next class period when she was grading the papers. Mrs. Richardson started his class by having them turn in their homework and put the next homework in their planner so they remember to do it and turn it in on time. And if they don't, then they get points deducted. And if they have missing work, then they have a week from that day to turn it in for extra points on a quiz or an exam. After the beginner class did the poster work with coloring and all sorts of things in their group, I noticed that there was morphology error, and one of the Spanish-speaking students said jumper instead of jumped and used the wrong suffix and morphed the word differently. And they don't teach morphology or syntax in the math or language arts classes, and they probably should to help them. A syntax issue where one student said it incorrectly and a student wrote it incorrectly was when Sierra said chips like my boyfriend when I asked her why she wasn't eating her chips. They were for her boyfriend, and she should have said my boyfriend likes chips instead. And then Dominic wrote down the tree climbed squirrel and ate nuts instead of the squirrel climbed the tree and ate nuts. And so I would have said it the proper way in American English, because I learned where the subject and the predicate and the noun and the verb go in a sentence, and he doesn't seem like he knows that, and so he wrote it incorrectly on their poster. In the upper division class, they seem to speak more fluently in Spanish, although the African American boys still speak in their native languages and talk like they are, on the street or in the hood, as they told me when I asked them how they were talking. And I didn't think that that was proper to use in a school, especially with a volunteer like myself, the helper, or with their teachers, which they do quite frequently. Another semantics issue that Dot made was the not stood thing, and I already talked about that. Yeah, so the school was very responsive in every different race and ethnicity within the school. I didn't see anyone being treated differently because of their race or where they were from or anything. The football team was very diverse, and they were all buddies when they were eating the pre-game lunch together when I left today from the advanced class. And all the advanced language arts students seem to work well together and switch up groups who they're with frequently. And in the math class, they all speak to each other except for Dot and Nemo. They just keep to themselves because they know that their students can't understand them, or the teacher, or me for that matter, and they keep going on their work. The other ethnicities of students that I noticed, white seems to be the minority, and except for in teachers and administration, they all seem to be primarily female and white, and that can create some issues with dominance of the white society, but that's just Utah. It's typical for most teachers and education to be white and female, unless you're a principal, then they're usually male, because they want to rise up in the system. Anyway, that is all I have for these 5 hours of observation and their errors on syntax, morphology, phonology, and all the different things I've noticed in the class. There are minimal behavior issues, just them flirting, on days where they're shorter or they feel like they can get away with it, and the teachers let me reprimand them a little bit by saying, oh, I'll give you detention if you continue that, or do I need to move you from your boyfriend because you guys are being disruptive. The book that the upper division linguistics class was called Sold, and it was about a refugee girl being sold into prostitution and that awful story, and they're about 40 pages in and had to, Miss Richardson just read it aloud to them instead of having them read aloud popcorn style or, one at a time, and that was kind of disheartening to me because I feel like for Miss Richardson to know where they're at reading-wise in American English, she should have them read out loud and then fix any issues. Other than that, it was really great. She actually speaks in Spanish and translates as much as she can, where Mr. Hare doesn't, and all the issues aren't too bad. There wasn't too many things that I found on a day-to-day basis, just those that stuck out to me that I told you about. Thank you, and have a great fall break, and I look forward to the next 10 hours of teaching in the East High's ELL classes for math and language arts. Thank you.